there's going to be 10 to 15% of people that will go out of their way to tell you how much they love you. There's going to be 10 to 15% of people that go out of their way to tell you how frustrated they are. And then there's going to be 70 to 80% of the people that just never say anything.
Hey, I'm Andrea Olson. I've been leading worship and training worship leaders for nearly 20 years, and my mission is to support worship leaders just like you in volunteer-supported ministries because I know what it's like. I've been there. It's amazing, but you have a big job, and sometimes you might feel a little bit alone. But I'm here to remind you that you aren't. We'll cover spiritual and leadership growth, practical resources, and get encouragement from other worship leaders from all over the world. I truly want to see you lead from the overflow, not the overwhelm. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and join me. Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. Did you know that we also have an online community specifically for worship leaders just like you in volunteer-supported ministries? It's called Overflow Worship Leaders Online, and it is filled with the 20 years worth of experience and wisdom and resources and tools that I've compiled and also that others have compiled on their journeys. And our goal is to pour it all into you because we believe that we are a part of something so much bigger than ourselves. We're part of something so much bigger than one church. We get to impact the future of worship in our churches. So we actually have the doors closed for enrollment right now, but our next enrollment is coming up in July. So if you want to get on the list to be the first to know when the doors open, just head to overflowworship.com/waitlist and you will be the first to know when the doors open in July. So one of the reasons that we did this coaching series is because I want you guys to get a peek behind the curtain of what's happening inside our program at Overflow Worship Leaders Online. And you know what? One of the things that has been so cool about this program is just getting to walk alongside of these leaders and getting to see their growth and development along the way. Because at Overflow Worship, this is so key. I want you guys, if you walk away from this with nothing else, I want you to understand, I want you to know that at Overflow Worship, we are not just about training. You can literally get training anywhere, right? You can get tools and training anywhere. Overflow Worship is different because we are all about development of the whole leader. We are about leadership development. So what does that mean? That means we walk alongside of you. That means we develop a relationship with you. And so I'm excited for you to get to witness these live coaching sessions with people inside of our program, because that's the fruit of all of that investment and development is these relationships that we've developed with them. And so I'm excited for you. Stick around, tune in, and you get to hear an amazing conversation that I had with Kennedie from Overflow Worship Leaders Online. Well, everybody, I am loving this series that we're doing. And if you're just tuning in, we are doing a series on coaching, live coaching. And so I have people from our program, people from Overflow Worship Leaders Online who have agreed so graciously to come and say, yeah, I'll be on the podcast. Let's do it. I got some questions. And so I'm really excited to have Kennedie Brown here from our program. Kennedie, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So will you just take a minute and tell everybody just a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work at Banner of Christ Community Church. It's a United Brethren church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've been the worship director here for 3.5 years, and I have enjoyed it so much. It's been a little bit of a wild ride, I think, as any ministry experience is. But at the beginning of my time, it was definitely, I just felt like God shoved me into the deep end. It was like, it's okay, kid, you're going to learn how to swim today. It was pretty crazy, but I have learned and grown so much in this role. I grew up in a ministry family. We traveled and did music ministry in churches full time. We lived in an RV for 8 years. That was just, wow. We were on the road full time. And so, yeah, I love to travel. That's kind of always just a part of my heart. I love to travel. And yeah, I love to write music, and I love leading worship. I love leading worship with my parents, and they're still actively doing full-time ministry too. So it's kind of the family business, and I love it, and it's great, and I love learning new stuff. So
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. And I've loved how, like, throughout our conversations since we met, I can tell that you have such a passion for ministry and for music, and also a passion for learning. Like, you just dive right in and are like, okay, let's go, let's learn, let's grow. And that's such an incredible mindset and a valuable perspective, because I feel like if we stop growing, we stop living. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, so, yeah, that's amazing. Well, before we jump into your questions, what's the most recent trip you've taken? Like, have you gone anywhere cool recently if you love traveling?
Yes, I actually just got back I was so blessed to be able to go on kind of a combination work conference trip, but also a vacation. And I was in Daytona, Florida for a week at a United Brethren leadership conference there. It was wonderful, very refreshing, and I extended it a little bit. My mom flew down, and we had a couple days in Orlando that we just rested and went to the beach and had some fun things. So yeah, I love Florida. I'll always go to Florida. But last summer I had the opportunity. I went to Switzerland for one day. It was one day. But it was an absolute blast. Yeah. So I flew standby and went to Switzerland, and that was an adventure, like truly an adventure.
I bet it was. Oh, that sounds amazing. That's awesome. Well, coming out of that time of resting and refreshing, are you ready with some questions to keep moving forward?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. So the one thing, there've been a few things I'm just chewing on lately. You know, I feel like there's things like theologically and practically, I'm always kind of like just chewing on all right, how do we handle this? How do we do this in a creative way? Or how do we remain like just faithful to the scriptures on how to handle this in our modern context? And that's been like one of the biggest challenges for me. It's always just evolving in my mind. I'm like, all right, Lord, how do we honor that in this context, today? And one of those things I'm like thinking about is online streaming, because everything today is instantly like we stream everything online. And I think live streaming services online has been really helpful for homebound members. I think that's been awesome. But I also think, especially through COVID, I don't know, maybe this is too harsh, but maybe it's enabled some people to just say, hey, I'll watch church from home.
Yep.
And I think we miss something when we're not all together. And so I'm trying to find the balance of providing the live stream to include people that are at home, but also encouraging members to stay connected to the body physically and coming and being a part of service, and just trying to navigate that issue in and of itself. I think post-COVID, I think our pendulum swung after COVID. So how have you handled that?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. And I'll start off with kind of a funny story. So I was leading worship in a church one weekend, and I always ask, I try to learn about the house that I'm serving in, right? Like, because if they bring me in to be a guest worship leader with their team, I want to make sure that I honor the space that I'm in. And so I said, are you online? Are you streaming? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, great. How would you like me to greet them? And he kind of laughed and he goes, Don't greet them. We want them here. So just ignore them. And he
They
laughed.
don't exist.
We laughed. He was joking, but also like kind of tongue in cheek, because it's like what you're saying. I mean, we want this ministry provided for those who can't come, but we don't want it to be a crutch for people who are just like, well, like you said, we'll just stream it online. And so the way that I've navigated that or tried to coach people through that is number one, just, it sounds really simple, but stating what the purpose of online is, not only just for the people online like that are watching, but then the people in the room are hearing it too. Things like, I'm really grateful for our online ministry, for those who are sick, for those who cannot be here in person because of, whatever reasons, or, maybe like you're on vacation and you're gone for one Sunday, but you still kind of want to connect with your body. Like, we're grateful that we have this for you. But ultimately, the Lord created the church body for us to be together, to be in community and to commune with one another. And so that sounds super simple, but sometimes it goes right over our heads. And so just find ways to do that, whether it's you or your pastor or whatever, to just iterate that, hey, this is why, this is the heart behind our online ministry. And maybe that's a conversation that you as a leadership staff need to have as well. That it's like, hey, what is the definition? Because I know some churches that actually treat their online as a campus, right? They have like a campus pastor and all of that. And it's actually serving people all over the world, which is pretty amazing and cool. But at the same time, when we're dealing with the local small to medium sized church that's under 1,000 people, most likely under 500 people, well, then that's a whole different dynamic, and it becomes like what you're talking about here. And so sitting down as a staff or a leadership team or group and saying like, let's define what this is so that we're certain we're all thinking about it in the same way and we're all moving forward in the same way, because you actually could have, without even knowing it, conflicting messaging between people that are like saying like, oh yeah, just watch it online. And it seems harmless, but it's kind of sending these messages that are contrary to what you would want to be communicated. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I think it's valuable, and I don't know how your church views like announcements and stuff like that, because people view it in different ways. They're like, oh, we don't want any announcements on Sunday mornings, or we have 5 minutes of announcements. But highlighting the different things that are going on in the church, and then the people online hear that, and maybe they would come to something that wasn't on Sunday morning, that would at least kind of break that barrier of getting them out the door. I know that like the church that we attend, there was a decent amount of time where they weren't doing any announcements, and we were fairly new. And even though I like grew up in this community and then came back 20 years later, I was like, man, I if I didn't know people who know people, I wouldn't know there was a youth group. I wouldn't know there was any children's ministry. Like, they don't talk about it. And now they have this great rhythm of just highlighting. There's not 10,000 announcements, but like highlighting the different cool things that are happening in various ministries. And that's so helpful. And I think sometimes when we're on the inside, we assume that everybody knows, but they don't. Yeah. And so that's something else to consider with your leadership team of like, hey, should we start highlighting some of the outside things that are happening that aren't on Sunday morning from the platform, so that people are, engaging and maybe thinking about, oh, I like dinner. I'd go to a dinner or whatever. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we've actually just started really thinking about where we're going to put the announcements in the service order, and kind of experimenting of where does it feel right, but also because there always are a couple of things that we want to mention, especially things that are happening that day that people maybe have forgotten about, that sort of a thing. But I think when you announce something from the stage, from the platform, it gives it like weight of like, oh no, we're saying it from the stage because it's important, that sort of a thing. But we've also been really intentional of communicating, hey, the music portion of service is not just worship. That's worship, but also our tithes and offering is worship. Yeah. Listening to God's word is worship. Meeting and greeting and fellowship is worship. And we've been really careful to not break up worship by saying, hey, we have a dinner tomorrow night. Like, we put them at the beginning or we put them at the end. And we want to leave like the pattern of worship untouched. And then we mention, hey, we're worshiping through giving our tithes and offerings today. And I love the simplicity of just stating it, because then it gets people thinking about it. And that's exactly what we've done with the worship flow of the service, of saying, hey, we're going to worship by fellowshipping. Let's meet and greet with one another. And then it just changes the mindset, and that mindset trickles down. So I love mentioning something about live stream during the service. That would be super easy, and it might reframe it for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's because I think, it's hard. You could start to dig into like, okay, obviously, what does scripture say about, like, what did it look like in the early church when they met together and they worshiped together, or like, what does the Bible say about it and all of that? And there's definitely a great place for that, but it's also, it could just be a mindset that they've gotten. I mean, it's been 4 years, which is crazy to me because my kids, I mean, they're young, but they remember, they remember
Yeah,
COVID,
definitely.
you know? And it's like, I mean, we get stuck in these rhythms of like, this is just how I do things now, right? And honestly, I mean, my husband and I, if we weren't like so committed to our walk with the Lord and to our church body and to ministry and all of that, I mean, we would wake up on Sunday mornings during COVID and be like, this is kind of nice. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
but then after a little bit, it wasn't nice anymore. And I think
Yeah.
people just need to be reminded of what, like what's happening here. Like, hey, there's stuff happening in the flesh and we want you to be a part of it. And the last thing I'll say about that is a third option, if you feel like you guys are just hitting a wall, like, man, they're just like, we're not getting through. I just ask them, like, pick up the phone and ask them, say like, hey, like, how can we best serve you? Or are there things about, being here in person that are a hindrance for you? Like, what is that barrier? Because we would love to see your face. It's not about like butts in seats and, get the dollars in the basket. I mean, yes, we give to our local storehouse, but it's like, we want to see your face. And sometimes maybe that is not a confrontational thing or anything, but like from a place of caring, if you have a care pastor or, someone who
Definitely.
that would be appropriate for, just asking the question might be a good one.
Oh, absolutely. And I think reaching out to people and people like getting a phone call from someone like from their church, I think that's so rare today of like, hey, I didn't just shoot you a text or whatever, but I called you and I just wanted to like check in. I think that communicates intentionality and a desire for connection. And I think we're missing some of that in the body today. I think everything with just cell phones in general, I think we're missing connection in a very strange way. And kind of like never before. So I love that idea. I would make some phone calls, make some house calls.
Yeah. And it's such a, like you said, it's such a beautiful thing because it's not an agenda. It's more like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while and we just want to check in on you. Like, how's life? How are things going? How's your family? And it might take them, they might be taken aback because like you said, it's not normal, but probably in a good way, right? Like you might just change their life and bless their week like you never knew you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great.
So what other questions do you have?
Well, so another one, my congregation, we're at about 140. And we're very multi-generational. We've got a lot of ages. We've got a lot of babies. We've got a lot of elderly and people that are in their 80s that were born at this church and have grown up here. We're actually this Sunday celebrating 100 years. It's our 100-year anniversary. We're so excited just to be celebrating God's faithfulness. And we've got a bunch of old books and artifacts and old Sunday school chairs that, people that were born in this church sat in. And we're just so excited to celebrate that. So we have so many different ages. And I feel like as a worship leader, it's the age-old question of how to keep everybody included in the musical worship. And it's, that old conversation, hymns versus choruses, like it just is. But I'm trying to figure out a way, and I love hymns. I love hymns. Hymns are awesome. And I try to include a lot of different music so that worship is, accessible to everybody. There's something in there that everyone can connect to easily. But I'm trying to figure out a way to help every generation feel included in worship and thought of in worship. That isn't just, I picked your favorite song to lead. I want it to go beyond just what songs I'm picking to lead. I want them to, as their worship leader, I want them to feel loved and thought of. And hey, I know that that's your preference and I respect that. But I don't want to bend over backwards every single week, and I'm not doing that. But how do you make people feel included and thought of, going beyond just choosing their favorite songs to lead.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just tell you that that's such an incredible perspective, and it's so thoughtful, and it's the mark of a great leader, and that's what you are, and the mark of somebody who genuinely cares about the good of the church body that they're serving, and that shows somebody who is serving with integrity, because you're going beyond like, I like to be up here and these are the songs I like, right? You're looking like, what are the needs of the congregation? What, and how can I serve them best? But you're so right. You come to a point where you hit a wall where it's like, okay, I feel like I'm just people pleasing, and that's not it either. And we also, if you swing the pendulum the other way and say like, well, I'm just going to tell them God told me to do these songs. Well, that's a tricky road too. Yeah. Right. And so where do we land, right? Well, I think one of the things that's been really helpful for me to realize over the years is that most of the time it's not about the song. It's not. And if we can look beyond what that person is saying, and they say like, I want you to do how great thou art, or whatever. Like, why don't we ever do how great thou art? Why don't we ever do? Okay. So if we engage with that person for a moment, rather than, okay, if I put up my defenses or my like, oh, okay, great, there's another thing for me to do. Like, now I have to please this person, right? If we say, okay, well, that's a great song. I love that song. Why do you love it so much? And just like, what do you love about that song? I love it because, what do you love? And then you might get a clue into what's really going on behind it. Maybe it's that song represents their salvation because they were in that little Sunday school chair, 65 years ago and gave their life to Jesus, and the Sunday school teacher sang that song or whatever. And you might not get that deep, but it will just give you a little bit of insight into, okay, what is behind this? And that right there is what a good leader is made up of, one who listens to their people. And so then you're like, okay, it's not about the song. It's about connecting with a piece of their past, right? And so in that, then I ask myself the question of, okay, what can I do on a Sunday to honor the past, right? And are there multiple people of that generation who kind of are saying a similar thing? Maybe it just represents a piece of their heart because that's what they grew up with and what makes them think of sitting in church on Sunday morning with their mom. And their mom's not here anymore, And so how can I honor the past? And that's something that even from the platform, you can let people know that that's what you're doing very easily, right? By saying like, I love this song, How Great Thou Art, because it represents so much for so many generations. I love it because, and I know some people love it because, and the words are still true, and so you're getting kind of behind the actual song, and maybe you end up doing that song once in a while, but it's not about pleasing the person because of their song request. It's listening to what's behind it. And then it's less of like old song, new song, Gen Z song, whatever. It's more like I'm just listening to the people. Paul Baloche said when he songwrites, he's like, songwriting is like penning our prayers to the Lord, right? But he said when he was songwriting, he still does this, but early on, he tells a story about listening to the prayers of the people. And he's like, I was at the altar call, like I was playing the guitar and like the pastor was praying and like people were coming and I was just listening to the prayers of the people. And somebody was saying, open my eyes, Lord, open my eyes. And that is where that song came from. Like he's just like, open the eyes, open our eyes, God. And it's like, he's listening to the prayers of the people. And so all of a sudden it's like song selections kind of go out the window and it's like, we're just listening to people. And so that's been really a helpful filter for me because it takes some of the pressure off. And then we still engage with those people in conversation, right? Like how did that song impact you? Why do you love it so much? I love it too. And then that gives you an opportunity to engage and learn more about them. And then we just say like, thank you so much. Like I will keep that in mind. I get a lot of song suggestions from people,
Yeah.
And then you can go on your way. So that's one side of it. And I have one other comment, but I want to pause. What other follow-up questions or thoughts do you have about that?
I feel like I really want my people to know that I care about them. I think being a young worship leader, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it can be assumed that, oh, I just do it this way because I'm in my 20s and this is what modern worship music is like. And I don't care about, any of the other generations. Sometimes it can be assumed just as a young 20-something, and I just want my people to know that I understand. I understand that you have a sentimental connection to a song. I'm going to be one of the 80-year-olds one day in a church going, can you please just sing Lion and the Lamb one time? I need to hear it, because it's so good. And that's what I connect with. And that was easy or special. But I think I just want to communicate authenticity and genuineness. And I don't have a lot of time on a Sunday to talk to everybody and make those connections. And I can, I'm usually running around and doing something. So I'm trying to figure out how to make those authentic connections with firstly, a tight schedule on a Sunday where I can't stop and talk to everyone. And I can't, have those connection moments, but I want them to know that I care. And I care about, about how we worship at our church and that they are a part of making up the culture of worship and that I care about that. So, making those connections, but with the craziness of a Sunday morning.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And it's, you might be able to make a short one, right, on a Sunday morning once in a while, and that's okay. But let me ask you this. Who is telling you that you're not communicating genuine care? Is it you telling yourself, or is it actually being communicated to you?
It could be a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we put these things in our head because it's maybe, it's our own insecurity, or it's just our own concerns because we want to do well, right? We want to do well in our job. We want to honor the task that has been given to us. And in this case, the ministry that's been entrusted to us. And so maybe that's something for you to think about. It's like, well, is that more me? Am I telling me that? Because my guess is, as much as we've interacted, I know it's been, it's not like we talk every day, but we've interacted enough where my guess is that most of the people in the congregation know that because of the way that you talk to me is probably the way you talk on stage. And it's so apparent that you care so much.
Good.
And so, yeah, yes, it is. So that's just something for you to think about, because oftentimes we put more pressure on ourselves and we don't realize that people see, they do. And, the reality is that there's going to be 10 to 15% of people that will go out of their way to tell you how much they love you. There's going to be 10 to 15% of people that go out of their way to tell you how frustrated they are. And then there's going to be, 70 to 80% of the people that just never say anything. And so it's hard when those small percentages are, and the ones that are negative are often louder. But that's a challenge for you to sit back and ask yourself that question. If it's actually just a belief you have in yourself and you need to take a step back and give yourself a little bit of a break. Be nice to you. As I say to my daughters every day, be nice to you. So that's the one side of it. And the practical side of it is when you do get into the application and you're like, yeah, I do want to have these conversations with people or these genuine connections. And if you can't on a Sunday morning, there's easy ways to weave in your genuine care from the platform. And I think you probably are, but tactical ways I kind of already mentioned, like we love this hymn, or I love this hymn because, and I love that it represents history for all of us here. Amen. Sing the song. Like you don't have to elaborate it on it too much. And people will see that. I mean, just by singing it, you wouldn't have to say anything.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that like practically applying it, it's great to like weave hymns into like traditional contemporary songs, like put a chorus in the middle or at the end or whatever, and kind of make a little bit of a segue. That works really well. And I think that's a way that people will come up to you afterwards and be like, oh, I loved that song. Thank you so much. And I actually liked it with that new little chorus in there. What was that chorus? Can you send me the link?
Yes, I can.
But I think the belief inside of our heads of like, well, this is who everybody thinks I am, and this is who everybody assumes that I am, is something that hinders us from leading to our fullest capacity and with our fullest confidence. Because most of the time, if there's people thinking that, it's a really small percentage. And then we have to decide if we're going to let that percentage steal our joy.
Oh, absolutely. And our effectiveness, because I know I can get inside my head and, the little like anxiety bubbles just start percolating and I'm like, oh boy, here we go, And when on a Sunday, it really should be, okay, I've prepared throughout the week. I've worked with my team. We're prepared, and we can just relax and lead worship and lead worship as and sing to Jesus as a body. And have that be the focus. Yeah, I think, when the anxiety starts rolling in my head a little bit, I get a little bit I can get stuck in a rut. And, sometimes it's hard to shake out of that orbit. It kind of gets circling and I'm like, oh, all right, gotta break out of that cycle before it goes much farther. But, I think being self-aware is really important when it comes to, all right, where's that thought coming from? Is that the enemy just trying to discourage me? And, or is that a valid concern that I need to focus on? Maybe I need to focus on it on a Monday when I'm not leading worship. I can think about it and not with the pressure of doing it.
Yes, that's a great tactic. Like, I'm going to write this down for Monday. This is not a thought I'm willing to entertain today.
This is a Monday thought. Stick it on the board.
You know what? I love that. Can we just start that? Like, how about we have a Monday Thoughts notebook for all of us in ministry? Like,
that's
this is
great.
A Monday thought. Like,
that is a Monday thought. Oh my gosh, yes.
That's
genius. We could make notebooks. We could sell them. It would be great.
Yeah, it's it. That's it, Kennedy. It's it. Oh man, that's so true. And one other thing that I was gonna say in regards to like our mindset is I think that there's also an assumption that we make about like the younger generation that's like, oh, they all want these types of songs, right? Which there's validity to that. But I think it's interesting because if we're thinking about an unchurched group of people, like young people who maybe they didn't grow up in church, maybe their parents were kind of, on the fringe or whatever, and they're just coming into church, they're not going to know the difference. They literally will not know the difference between a hymn and the newest Maverick City song, which is really interesting to think about. And so then it's like, what kinds of assumptions am I placing on this music, on these songs, and on these people? And I just need to take a step back and think about, okay, and ask the Lord, like, what do you want me to do with this as I seek to serve these people best? And sometimes I think we make it harder than it needs to be because, like you say, I get in my head too. And I'm just like overthinking things. So that's another thought for you to ponder on a Monday. For your Monday thoughts, there's another one for you.
Monday thought list is a new thing now. Love that.
It is. Yes. If I would have had that when I was in my 20s, just starting out, that probably would have been a really healthy practice for me because because time passes and it's not as big of a deal. Like even 24 hours later, I'd come back to my Monday thought list and be like, yeah, I can give this to the Lord. I don't even have to think about it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not even a big deal anymore.
Oh, definitely. Or I know for me, my mom always told me, like, if I was upset about something at night, she'd be like, you need to just go to bed, because in the morning with the light of day and you've got new mercies from the Lord, like it will be more workable. You'll be able to have the energy to tackle that problem, or maybe you'll realize it really wasn't a problem. And I think that's a good thing too, of like, just put a pin in it and sleep on it. Don't think about it. Give yourself permission to not worry about it for a second and circle back. And I think we always look at things with a little more clarity, just a little bit of time going by. So Monday thoughts, that is an instant classic.
It is. I love it. Yeah. Well, I think that is a great spot for us to end our conversation today. So for everyone who's listening, if you've got something that's bugging you and you're stewing over or overthinking, just write it down, close the book, give it to the Lord, go to sleep, and come back to it in the morning with new mercies, fresh eyes, and ask the Lord, hey, what do you want me to do with this today? Is this something that's worth my time and my energy? And if not, I give it to you. And if so, then show me how to navigate through this. But oftentimes I think our minds get bombarded, especially on ministry days. And so it's good to have that practice of like, you know what? I'm not going to give my attention to this. So that's a really beautiful thing. Well, Kennedie, I am just so grateful that you brought such thoughtful questions. My brain is still rolling and I could go on and on and on. But it was just such a joy to chat with you today. And I was wondering if before we wrap up, if you would tell everybody maybe one thing that has been impactful for you inside of Overflow Worship Leaders Online, whether it's an experience or something you've learned, like what has it meant to you?
Oh my goodness. Overflow. Firstly, thank you so much for having me, Andrea. I think having the few conversations that we've had have been so life-giving. And I think the biggest thing for me with Overflow has been the resources are amazing. Firstly, the toolkit has been awesome. But I think the most important thing for me is just the reminder that I'm not in this by myself, and that there are other worship leaders doing the exact same thing with very similar congregations across this country, and knowing that there's people that are older and wiser and they have wisdom that they are willing to pass down, and I just have to ask for it. Having that connection has been invaluable for me, especially I know most churches are like small to medium sized, and sometimes it can feel very just isolated. I'm the only worship director, and our church is kind of the standard size, and it's so there's moments where it can feel isolating, and so to have that connection to others and to just have conversations of, hey, yeah, I'm struggling with that too. Hey, this is what I did in practices that helped that problem, to be able to share what's worked for you, and also to ask about, things that you're chewing on theologically and practically. It's just been amazing for that in and of itself, just to feel part of a community that's doing the same thing. It's been amazing. That's my favorite thing.
Oh, that's so cool to hear, Kennedie. Thank you for sharing that. And we just love having you, and we love hearing, from you in our sessions, and just what the Lord is doing, and all the exciting things happening where He's placed you. So thank you for opening yourself up, because it takes courage to open ourselves up too when we are stepping into a new community. And so we're just really grateful and honored to have you with us. And thank you again so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Andrea. I appreciate it too.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, I know I had a great time. I hope that you did too. And that's it for today's episode. And until next time, keep on thriving. Did you know that we also have an online community specifically for worship leaders just like you in volunteer-supported ministries? It's called Overflow Worship Leaders Online, and it is filled with the 20 years worth of experience and wisdom and resources and tools that I've compiled and also that others have compiled on their journeys. And our goal is to pour it all into you because we believe that we are a part of something so much bigger than ourselves. We're part of something so much bigger than one church. We get to impact the future of worship in our churches. So we actually have the doors closed for enrollment right now, but our next enrollment is coming up in July. So if you want to get on the list to be the first to know when the doors open,
Just head to overflowworship.com/waitlist and you will be the first to know when the doors open in July.